Today at the National Press Club, ABC Managing Director Hugh Marks. The former Nine Chief Executive will set out his vision for a confident national broadcaster and detail how it will adapt and keep connecting to audiences in a rapidly changing media landscape. Hugh Marks with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club of Australia on Ngunnawal Country for today's Westpac address. My name is Jane Norman. I'm the National Affairs Correspondent for the ABC and a Director here at the club. Our guest today is the ABC's Managing Director, Hugh Marks. 8 months into his tenure at the national broadcaster, as has been pointed out in the introduction, the MD wants to lay out his vision for a confident ABC and start to instil a sense of hope in its future. Hugh Marks has plenty of experience as a media executive, 5 years as a CEO of Nine, where he managed to pull off the broadcaster's merger with Fairfax. As has been pointed out previously, he's no longer answerable to corporate shareholders, but the ABC sort of has its own version. The millions of viewers and many staff who feel a strong sense of ownership over the organisation. Now you can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @PressClubAust. Our hashtag is NPC. Please welcome today's guest, Hugh Marks.
Thanks, Jane. I'd like to start off just by acknowledging the traditional owners on the lands of which we meet and acknowledge their leaders past, present and emerging, obviously any Indigenous people in the room today and watching on television. It's great to be at the National Press Club here for the first time as Managing Director of our beautiful ABC. As Australians, we still look out for each other. We prize opportunity, we value fairness, we seek societal cohesion. And while no doubt there remain issues that we have not resolved, at the end of the day, overall, we know we're pretty privileged to live in this country. This is something we should celebrate. And I reckon even you lot in this room, you journalists, you sometimes cynical bunch, might agree. You might not say it out loud, but you might agree with me. We can debate what makes the country work so well. That spirit of fairness I spoke about, compulsory voting, democratic elections with a peaceful transfer of power, our universal healthcare or quality education system, recognition of the importance of social services. But one lesson we know from developments around the world that we cannot take this Australia of ours for granted. We must continue investing in our Australian stories, in Australian creativity, to build on our shared understanding, our shared knowledge, themes that bring us together, make us who we are, prepare us for the challenges that may come our way. And any discussion of what makes Australia succeed over the long term must include Australia's ABC. We have a big and important role to play. It is true that Australia has a vibrant and generally responsible media market compared to many other places around the world, one that grows with new voices every day. Joe Rogan, for example. That vibrancy of our media will, in my view, only become more important in what makes our country unique, in enabling our success as a free and cohesive nation. It's undoubtedly something to be proud of. It's one reason why we haven't descended into warring tribes and instead broadly maintained our national unity. But the ABC stands out as a precious national asset of a kind you won't find in many other countries. We're not beholden to political patronage or commercial investment or those lovely touchy advertisers, and we are free for everyone. We're available to anyone on all devices at any time. There are no paywalls that lock people out. We are funded by and for the public. This contributes to Australian equity and fairness in knowledge and information. It contributes to our Australia. The ABC is a place a lot of people come to every day. Many others engage with regularly. Some engage only when they really need it, and some maybe when they have to. But we are there. Always on, always available. We are the nation's town square where everyone has a place and every Australian must matter. Which is why, as a nation, we must never fail to believe in and invest in the ABC. We know there's a lot of competition for attention today, almost unlimited content from established and emerging sources, plus almost limitless options for influencing or selling to citizens. So where does the ABC sit in this evolving mix of voices and options? We exist to provide the public with the stories through which we can understand ourselves better as a people and as a nation. We exist to inform, entertain and educate for the public good. Ultimately, we're here to preserve and promote Australian knowledge and protect and promote our national identity. Now, I've been in this role for 8 months and I can tell you this home of Australian information, ideas and creativity is looking ahead with confidence and with ambition. Next year, we'll have a range of new content. We announced the slate tomorrow. It's very exciting. We're going to have 60 primetime premium television series, up from 43 in 2025. A slate of new podcasts and on-demand audio to further complement our radio services. New and of-the-moment news formats that will contribute even further to this goal of shared knowledge and shared stories. And we're really excited to be able to present it. It's an exciting time to be at the ABC. We are increasing our content and the services that we provide for the benefit of Australians. Now, are we more or less relevant today? Everyone has their opinion about how well the ABC is performing. Fair enough. Some are running a narrative decline and irrelevance. Let me tell you, they could not be more wrong. Let's look at the data. It's important. Start with news. In the early 2000s, the 7pm news had 1.1 million Metro viewers, while today the number is more like 550, 600,000. Sounds like decline, but it's not representative of how audiences consume news today. Take that Metro news number, the 550, 600,000, then you've got to add 10% for people watching on News Channel at 7pm, the National Bulletin. Add another 10% for people consuming the news on iView. Then you've got to add 2 million daily users of ABC News Digital, 1.3 million people turning into the ABC News Channel daily, 8.1 million minutes viewed on YouTube per day, and 400,000 daily engagements via ABC News through social media. So here are the facts. Consumption of ABC News is growing. We are becoming more important. It's just different, and it's just not consumed as the saying would go by older Australians. It's there for everyone, it's consumed by everyone. Take our children's programming, for instance. It's the same pattern. Digital engagement with kids and family content is booming. Each week, we reach 3.7 million Australians across broadcast and live streaming for our kids and family content. Add the 400,000 viewers who access that content on iView and 250,000 who find us via the Kids app. Our channels on YouTube attract around 6 million views each week. BTN and BTN High are programs specifically designed for primary and high school students and are unique in our landscape. And now we all know that Bluey has taken Australia by storm. In fact, it's taken the world by storm. But where would we be if the ABC didn't serve Australian children? In radio, live radio, that so-called dying medium, it's where ABC broadcasters connect with nearly 5.5 million listeners across the metro and major regional markets and more than 2.1 million regional listeners every week. We are by far the #1 streaming network across the 5 major city markets, with nearly 1.5 metro listeners consuming via streaming each week. And for those that say Radio National's audience isn't big enough, I hear it a lot, let's remember that the audience on radio is but one part. The network contributes significantly to our on-demand audio offering, with many programs getting more audience on demand than they do on radio. Now we have podcasts. Put your hands up in the room if you host a podcast. I'm sure a few of the journos do here. Yes, there you go. A few hands go up. 3 of Australians' top 10 podcasts are made by the ABC. 50 of the top 300, reaching more than 2.8 million listeners in September alone, 2.9 million in October. Let's talk about Australian drama. It contributes to our ability to understand our society, the challenges we face, the sense of each other and how we coalesce. And here is where the shift in audience behaviour is the greatest. Yes, Australian dramas regularly achieved audiences in the millions on the ABC of old. But let's not forget that Fisk, starring the wonderfully talented Kitty Flanagan, has attracted, as of today, an average audience of more than 3 million viewers per episode, sustained over 3 seasons. Over time, that number's likely to end up around 4 million. Now just remember, that's a number equivalent to the respective football grand finals. Overnight ratings matter, but they're absolutely not even close to the correct measure of performance for the ABC of today. Performance must be measured on total audience engagement across all platforms and must be measured by our impact on society over time. And here's the thing, parts of old media are indeed challenged. You can't expect to monetise a daytime movie of the sort I personally used to watch growing up instead of doing my HSC study. But premium storytelling in all its forms is growing in its engagement. It's more relevant today than it's ever been. It can be more impactful in informing national discussions than ever before. In fact, our programs do better than any major streamer. Underinvesting in it is at the nation's peril. We risk losing our sense of self as Australians and would fail to invest in our national cohesion. The ABC adds value and makes an impact as the national broadcaster when we craft those narratives that inform Australians about their society, our institutions and the issues that matter. We inform and therefore equip Australians to deal with the circumstances of their daily lives and the events facing them and their communities. We hold the powerful to account through news, current affairs and incredible investigative journalism. We offer captivating stories that entertain, they interest Australians, they provide comfort, they enlighten their minds. And we invest in science, the arts, religion and ethics, content like no other broadcaster. The ABC does things that no other media can or would do. We have the privilege of being able to do so. During natural emergencies, Australians turn to the ABC because the ABC saves lives. It's there for its communities. More extreme weather events make our role even more important. In 2024-25, the ABC responded to 316 fire events and 242 severe weather events. With Cyclone Alfred, communication disruptions left many relying on battery-powered radios for those vital updates from ABC Radio. We bring the outback and rural Australia to the broader and mainly urban Australia with love programs like Muster Dogs, Backroads, my favourite, Landline, my father's favourite. No other media company does this at scale. The ABC joins Australians in celebration. Last year, ABC's New Year's Eve broadcast reached 5 million viewers, Australians sharing the celebrations via the ABC. The ABC challenges our perceptions through groundbreaking social programs like You Can't Ask That, which hosts frank conversations with people who are too often stigmatised or excluded. This program has now delivered 7 seasons across 12 countries in 9 different languages. Or The Assembly, that has provided many of my favourite interviews this year as high-profile Australians are forced to deal with not David Spears or Jane Norman, but a different kind of interviewer, one that makes them really feel. We champion Indigenous storytelling, including groundbreaking programs like Deep Time and the recent Endgame with Tony Armstrong, which tackled racism in sport. Our impact can be felt through the companionship and enrichment of ABC Radio. It's where guests and listeners get to talk to us and get to hear each other as well. It's home to some of the most thoughtful, delightful, valuable conversations you'll find anywhere on earth. It's a unique treasure. Our support of Australian music is vital. More than 50% of the content on Triple J, ABC Classic, ABC Jazz is Australian, compared to an industry standard which maybe struggles to get to the bare teens. Our impact doesn't stop at home. In our neighbourhood, the ABC is the most trusted international media in Fiji, PNG, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tonga and Vanuatu. ABC journalists are now mentoring and training journalists across the Indo-Pacific too. This benefits democratic discourse in our region, which benefits all of us. The ABC was in the unique position recently to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the independence of PNG with two major programs, again, uniquely in our country. In journalism, impact means breaking stories. We inform Australians every day and everywhere about the local, state and national stories of the day, about the choices we face as people in a changing world, about the things that impact them, particularly in regional markets where the economic realities of the audience shift to digital consumption means that our role is more important than ever in those communities. It is a huge responsibility. The ABC takes no editorial stand other than our charter-directed commitments to the rule of law, freedom of speech and religion, parliamentary democracy and non-discrimination. And when we talk about journalistic impartiality, we aren't talking about passivity. Impartiality isn't seeking false balance, where every idea, no matter how weak, is presented as equal. The journalistic task and skill is to select the stories that matter and present the facts and relevant perspectives that equip people to make up their own minds. When it comes to journalism, take a recent classic example of our journalistic value to the nation. Since late 2024, journalist Adele Ferguson, producer Chris Gillette and the ABC's investigative reporting team have been digging into Australia's $20 billion childcare sector, which is heavily subsidised by the federal government, managed by the states and increasingly dominated by for-profit providers. The shocking scale of abuse and neglect of children and babies they and other ABC News reporters uncovered has laid bare a sector in crisis. The ABC's sustained and intense scrutiny of the sector has now resulted in state and federal governments and providers enacting immediate reforms, several inquiries, resignations of key childhood figures and renewed calls for a Royal Commission and other changes, all aimed at keeping children safe. ABC investigative journalism revealing major issues in a key industry the public relies on is the ABC at its best. Now, what does this all mean for what we do? It means that Australians interact with us in many ways. What hasn't changed is that audiences want stories of importance, relevance and pertinence. And it's more important than ever that we fulfil that mission with excellence, with dedication and with the responsibility inherent in our publicly funded model. Our mission is to produce more of this great content and use the platforms we have at our disposal to bring more of those stories to more Australians every day. Things are changing fast, so we'll need to find solutions, we'll need to be nimble, we need to meet audiences on the platforms they prefer, but we must continue to change. There's a challenge to get young Australians engaged with news content, so we will need to find ways to address that. One option is we look at more short-form video for news on social. We're ambitious about building tailored content approaches, not to social media in general, but to each platform in particular, reflecting the audience makeup and content style of each one. Believe it or not, YouTube, very different to TikTok. And we'll make announcements about this tomorrow, which I'm very excited about. Clearly, audiences are also responding to long-form audio storytelling through podcasting, so we'll be doing more of that. And guess what? Now it's vodcasting, so more of that as well. It's really an exciting format to be able to tell stories. We must have a large digital publishing presence and we must have an expanded on-demand platform for TV and for audio. But above all, it's that story-making skill, the ability to craft narratives of insight and power. That is what will matter more than ever. The story matters, the platform distributes it. We've sent that message out to program makers, calling for ambition and boldness. My job is to help them deliver that. We want to make powerful, beautiful television, audio and news content. We want great storytelling, whether that's drama, true crime, docos, history or science. Things that demand talent and effort and design and take time. All these things have to come together to captivate audiences. We must compete on excellence with the global market. The really good news is the investment return equation is far better now than it ever was. I've been in this business a long time. If you make great content 30 years ago, in the past, it went to air once, maybe got a repeat, that was it, done and dusted. Now, if you make great content, you just don't get one shot at an audience. It sits on our platforms. You can make content audiences will discover, love, and they'll listen or watch to it maybe tomorrow or maybe in 20 years' time on many different platforms and devices in many different environments. Great shows become part of our unique Australian culture. They're to be cherished and celebrated through time. The great thing about today is successes aggregate over time. These are the links and memories that forge deep social bonds, that bind Australians together through the decades of their lives, that unite different cultures, different demographics, different communities, that remind us of what's important about being Australian, that invest in our unique culture, of which we all should be so proud. Now, when it comes to collaboration, we operate in a complex technology, information and entertainment ecosystem that competes and collaborates. What we aim to do is keep working with others for mutual benefit, ultimately for the benefit of Australians. We've always collaborated with the Australian production sector, bringing forward great stories and programs for Australians across TV and audio. Maintaining our bond with rural and regional Australia must remain core to our mission. So we're doing a couple of things. We're giving local news outlets free access to ABC News digital content at times of significant events affecting their local communities. That way, we help sustain local news outlets that are an important part of regional and rural life. The ABC does not need to be the only door. We're also working on a project to help local media improve the breadth and quality of their own news coverage. Hopefully, a further contribution by us to quality journalism and equity of news that matters to those communities. Just as we're working in collaboration with smaller local news outlets, we look to the global tech companies to do the same with us, with the ABC. Recent research has shown social media algorithms have steadily increased the relative amounts of political content and strong negative sentiment people encounter in their feeds, and that promotes cultural division and conflict. I consider the global tech companies operating in Australia have an obligation to the Australian community where they do business and prosper. And what I would hope and expect to see is that those companies recognise the value of their social licence to operate in Australia. If you want to be here, be part of our society. It's pretty special. They clearly have the power to tune their algorithms to turn off access to news. Look at Meta and look at Canada. They must manage their algorithms to promote responsible and non-divisive content, such as that provided by the ABC, and have a reasonable and mature discussion about what is the level of reasonable value exchange between those companies and organisations like the ABC. We can contribute to their success. Most importantly, we can lend a hand to help them mitigate the pressing social issues that their platforms generate. Real personal harm, misinformation, polarisation. I ask them to work with us and recognise that in doing so it mitigates these risks in a responsible way. Engage with us on the value exchange. Embrace the ABC for that full, accurate, impartial content that is a defence against the rising risk of social harm. I look forward to more discussions with all of them on this. Now, the ABC has the privilege and deep responsibility of owning the role of national storyteller in the public interest. We have long been an integral part of the nation-building infrastructure of Australia, and that's not going to change. In fact, it will only become more important. Realistically, in a big and fast-moving organisation with many parts and thousands of decisions each day, things will go wrong from time to time. Not every decision will be perfect. We must always move at speed. When that happens, we must own it, make the appropriate correction and move forward. We learn from our mistakes, we do better. We need trust, but we must not cower. This is how we will continue to earn trust. The key to everything is to start with great content. And that means investing in Australian creativity, Australian intellectual property, Australian people. What I see ahead is opportunity to connect and engage with more Australians, to capitalise on the enormous journalistic and creative talent that exists in this country. This is a real public good. To be the number one source of facts and truth, to be the freely available media, to tell stories that inform, delight, uplift, resonate through time, to collaborate with others, to get the maximum exposure for our content and benefit for all Australians, to contribute to the success of Australia, and to be the most important contributor to what binds us together, not what tears us apart. and to be at the centre of those discussions. Social infrastructure is as important as physical infrastructure. It may not be as visible, but it's there through the screens, radios, devices of our nation. It's vitally important to who we are, that we as Australians own, and it will be a key to a successful future. I want you all to stay tuned for what's coming. Thank you.
Hugh, thank you for your address today. There are lots of interesting elements that our journalists here, I'm sure, will be asking you about. But I wanted to ask you a question about another public broadcaster that's going through a very tumultuous period, and that is the BBC. We've had senior leaders resign, apologies to Donald Trump, the prospect of a lawsuit between Donald Trump and the broadcaster itself. I wanted to know what lessons you see in that incident, but more broadly at the BBC, and how you apply those to the ABC. How do we avoid a situation like that here?
Yeah, no, it's obviously very topical and obviously a good time to be able to talk today, because I think there are real lessons in that exercise. And the lessons for me are twofold. One is, I think sometimes we don't quite recognise the way that the ABC has been set up and through our Act, and the importance of independence. And I think if I look at the BBC and I see a lot of the commentary that's been going on around, what's happened to them, not just in that last event, but over time, you see there are things that have been chipping away at that independence. I can't tell you how important it is in the way the organisation works that we are funded by the Parliament of Australia, the public through the Parliament of Australia, that there is an independent board, and that the Managing Director is independent again of the board. All of those various elements, when they work well, really provide the framework for me to be able to give our people the opportunity to do their best work without fear of second guessing. Am I doing the right thing? Am I treating the right interests? Have I got the politics of this right? To be able to stick to accuracy and impartiality. Like, it's so important that everybody's not second guessing themselves and thinking, I've got to tick this off or tick that off. Stick to the journalism, the storytelling. So I think that's a really important lesson, and it's actually almost a uniqueness. I went to the public media conference recently, and our independence mechanism, most public media are said to be independent, but ours is quite unique and I think really special, and that's, I think, well done to those that set it up. I think the second thing, and I spoke about this a bit in the speech, is we have to not cower, but we can't be defensive. When we make a mistake, own it. It's not hard. People accept this is a fast-moving world. People expect journalism operates on a very fast cycle. People are under pressure to file and get stories up, and that's what the public needs, because they need to be informed. So sometimes mistakes happen. So when mistakes happen, we acknowledge them, we own them, we make the correction, we move on. We don't defend at all costs. With the responsibility of that, that independence brings huge responsibility, and the counterbalance to that is an acknowledgement that when we get it wrong, we must own it and move on.
And you've been at the ABC now for 8 months. Are you satisfied that those processes are up to scratch, that the ABC doesn't counter but then does actually correct the record when we get it wrong?
Yeah, no, I've spoken about this quite a bit. I did find when I arrived at the ABC, there was a defence mindset, a defensive mindset that existed in the organisation, which was been established, and these things happen over decades, right? They just eke up and eke up. It's like the boiling frog principle. And the organisation, had a fearfulness of external force. And I think that fearfulness drives a counterproductive behaviour, which is we must at all times react to that. I think we've had great discussions since I've been at the ABC, and we've really got our heads around the importance of owning mistakes quickly. And will we get it right all the time? I'm sure we won't. I'm sure there's still lessons to learn, but I think we're much better at it now. And I see that in a lot of the actions that we've taken over the last few months. And I know the whole team, my team in particular, has bought into that and the importance of that as a concept, that with the massive responsibility comes the responsibility to own mistakes.
All right, our first question is Tess Economy from AAP.
Thank you very much for your time today. I just wanted to pick up on what you just said about when you arrived, you found fear, and that was due to external pressures over years. I appreciate what you just said about owning mistakes, but what steps will management take, or how will management support their staff to be able to be confident and ambitious in their work?
No, thank you. It's the essence of everything, right? Given the opportunity, journalists can do great work. So it's really important I provide that environment for that to happen. And I think that fearfulness thing, it's a hard thing to put exactly on how that happened or when it happened or what were the elements that drive. I think it was, and sometimes it's perceived rather than real. So I think it just comes with the really important thing is stick to the story. What's the story about? Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? What elements did we get right or wrong? What was the research? What were the sources? Stick to that journalistic talent. Have those discussions rather than the political discussions. And that's what's important, and stick to that. So for me, being able to have those discussions with my teams and basically talk about their work rather than the environment is really important. And I think, Kim as well, Kim Williams, the chair of the ABC, he and I have had great conversations about the importance of these levels of independence. And I can tell you what, when the shit hits the fan, Kim's going to be in his element. He's going to be great in those moments. And that'll be important. So, it might happen at any given time. So I think having all the right people in the right roles and respecting the independence and constantly going back to the work, I think it's those conversations that are important to success.
Our next question is Millie Mulroy from the SMH and Age.
Thanks, Mr. Marks, for that address. Millie Mulroy from the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. It's been more than a month since the ABC launched an investigation into a Four Corners reporter after they co-hosted a podcast without official sign-off, sponsored by a crypto casino that isn't licensed to operate in Australia. Is there any update on this investigation, and how important is it to get these investigations right, considering the current attacks on impartiality and bias that the ABC is facing from Sky News and The Australian?
Thanks for that question, Millie. Look, yes, one thing we learnt from the Antoinette Lattouf errors that the ABC made is follow the process. When something goes wrong, follow the process. Make sure we do all of the things that are necessary to have a rigorous and thoughtful investigation of whatever occurs. So we're going through that process. That process involves a number of different elements, including obviously respect for the individuals concerned, to make sure that we dot every I and cross every T. So that process is ongoing. I can't give you a date as to when it will finish, but it's important that we follow the process and we do it in a respectful, measured, considered way. And that when we make decisions with the light of and the benefit of that process. In terms of other elements, forces on the ABC, we have to be subject to scrutiny. We have this huge responsibility. So with that responsibility comes the inevitable, scrutiny that we must face all the time. I welcome reasonable scrutiny of the ABC, and we should be subject to it. And sometimes that'll help us do better work. Getting that balance right is always the exercise for our journalists, and I think it's together. This is a field where we all work in the same area, and actually it's not just the ABC, it's the ABC's contribution in the matrix of all the media that exists in our country that makes it work. We all have a role to play. In fact, we're the big top of the funnel. We're the free player that, hopefully engages people in the importance of news and drama and Australian content and Australian stories. So, I welcome that scrutiny. I welcome reasonable scrutiny, and that'll be part of what we have to do going forward.
Thank you.
Caitlin Rinchell from the West Australian.
Thank you for your address today. What is the purpose of the proposed journo feed, which has been floated internally as part of the innovation report? What is the cost of it, and is it a good use of the ABC's resources, or should the news director instead be focusing on amending factual errors and concerns within editorial direction?
Thank you for the question. I've never heard about the proposed journo fee, so I'm not able to answer that question. I regret to tell you, Justin's here. You can take it up with him later if you like. I don't. Maybe you can tell me what it's getting at, but no, we must invest in journalism. We must make that exercise as supported as it possibly can be for people to do great work. Environment is really important. People feeling supported, clarity about what their objectives are. One of the things we had to do very early on was make sure that we were clear about strategy. You know, we had this digital first philosophy, which I understood why that was getting at. Don't wait for the 7 p.m. news to release a story. But also it doesn't make another sense. Everything is digital these days. So I've just brought that back to story first. When you bring it back to story or first, you talk about the importance of journalism. There's no doubt about that. So we should not be doing anything that gets in the way of that happening.
Are you aware of any movements to make journalists more creator, individual, siloed types? That's part of this secretive project, allegedly. And do you see the value in that, given the fragmented media that you've spoken about in your address today?
Again, I'm not aware of the secret project, so it can't be that good a project if I'm not aware of it, but I could be wrong. Things can happen without my knowledge, but I like to be at the centre of things, so I think I would have a fair idea of what's going on. No, look, I think the work that we do all the time and the work we must do is make sure that the ABC is efficient in the execution of, you know, the taxpayer-funded obligations that we have. So, you know, we should always be subject to external and internal scrutiny, and we should be making sure that, you know, everyone's working in the most effective way they possibly can for the greatest public good. So if that's part of what you're talking about as a secret project, it's no longer a secret. We do that all the time. But no, I'm not aware of any particular secret projects. Sorry to disappoint you.
Discussions afterwards, perhaps.
See what's unveiled tomorrow at the showcase. Cameron Redden from Sky News.
Mr Marks, thanks so much for your address. Cameron Redden at Sky News. On that subject of welcoming reasonable scrutiny, you would be aware of concerns raised, including on Sky News, about the coverage of Donald Trump's January 6th speech, but others too raising concerns around the Line of Fire series, the gunshot audio. Media Watch this week, for example, raised concerns about gaps in the coverage on transgender issues. Do you view these as reasonable scrutiny of fair criticism, and do you think they're worthy of further inquiry?
Yeah, I mean, as I said at the time, I think the comparison of the ABC Four Corners to the BBC Panorama show was opportunistic. The same faults were not consistent on both programs. So I didn't accept that was legitimate criticism, and any reasonable amount of work, I think, would have come to that conclusion. So that one I thought was opportunistic and false. I think when it comes to some of the issues you mentioned, and particularly about the transgender issues and where the ABC sits on that and our journalistic balance, you know, these are discussions that I think are reasonable to be asked externally and are reasonable for us to be thinking of ourselves internally. These are discussions that myself and Justin are having, the head of news, are having all the time. You know, some of these issues are incredibly delicate. They involve potential harm to individuals. But that doesn't mean that the ABC shouldn't, in its coverage, ensure that we are doing a job of covering the relevant perspectives that are necessary to ensure that we provide full coverage on these issues. So, yeah, I think scrutiny is reasonable for the ABC. Our internal scrutiny needs to be, you know, we need to be always asking ourselves not just about the accuracy of the stories that we put to air, but where might there be areas where we haven't given the relevant amount of coverage that maybe we should have as an organisation? And I can assure you that those conversations are ongoing and constant.
Thank you.
Our next question is Corey McLeod from Innovation Oz.
Thank you for your address. I'm wondering if there's ever been conversations or consideration about the export value of that trusted news. And the reason I ask is BBC Studios, as an example, in a world of dis and misinformation, is becoming increasingly relevant and commercial in the US and other parts of the world. Is that something that the ABC would consider? I'm not sure if it's in the Act, but it does seem as though there is a demand for trusted news.
No, there is no doubt. And Australians have a unique perspective. I mean, that's what I spoke about. And I think it's a very valuable perspective because it comes from this great sense of fairness we have as a nation. And, you know, even all the matrix of media and coverage and discussion that we have, there is a tone to what happens in Australia that I think is valuable on that world stage. We actually have a number of great services that service the Asia-Pacific region. As I said, our news brand is trusted in many of the local Pacific nations that, you know, are our neighbours, and we do a lot of work to improve journalism and services in those markets. I think the ABC has a real role to play in not just investing in Australia, but also our relationship with our near neighbours and their democratic institutions and governance. And And the government has recognised that with funding to make those services available through not only the Pacific, but we also have an Indo-Pacific service as well. So I think we do some of that. Are we going to go like the BBC and start ABC Australia? That brand has already been taken, so
Yeah,
no.
but commercially, would that ever be a discussion?
Look, I think commercially we do a lot. We do a lot of programs, both television and audio and news, right? They do have value. I think the ABC has traded itself out of that value over time. I actually think in this modern world where, you have streamers who are making a bunch of really great shows and with huge production values, we have to find, if we're going to be relevant, we have to compete in that space. So we have to find new models that enable us to work with, independent creative organisations to be able to deliver that sort of work that will have great international value, and the ABC, on behalf of the taxpayer, should participate in that value. I mean, I talk about Bluey all the time. The BBC makes probably $300 million a year out of a property that was a joint BBC-ABC production, but we should have been more active in the participation in what that was going to be. Now, nobody can say when any show starts. I mean, you have a fair view about whether that's going to be a show of that potential or not, but we have to be there, and we have to find models that enable us to be there, and it's responsible for us on behalf of the taxpayer to make sure that we are there. So yes, we're looking at all that at the same time. But at the same time, you don't want to be over-commercialised. It's important that we do work that's important. It's important that we remain focused on serving the Australian public. So there's a balance there to be got.
Thank you.
As someone from a commercial background, does the Bluey ownership model, the rights now, is that a source of deep frustration for you, knowing how many millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that we're missing out on? Like, wasn't it the most streamed show in the United States recently? You kind of look at that and think, how much money we could be making?
It's the biggest show in America. A show about a little Aussie, blue heeler made out of Brisbane. In minutes viewed, the biggest show in America, which is incredible. And it's probably the biggest show around the world. So, yeah, it's a lost opportunity, but again, it's happened. Here is where we are. Let's not make the same mistake again. We have the potential to look at different models so that we don't lose those opportunities, and it's important for the taxpayer that we do find them when we can.
Okay. Jack Quayle from The Australian.
Jack Quayle from The Australian. Thank you very much for your address, Mr Marks. As Managing Director, you also serve as Editor-in-Chief of the National Broadcaster. And in that capacity, I'm wondering if you can nominate any areas that you think are particularly underserved or need improvement in the ABC's coverage. If you could nominate any areas where you think that the ABC can improve.
Yeah, look, it's something we talk about all the time, and I won't go to specifics, but I'll talk about one that I've been speaking about and at length, and to the extent that everybody, rolls their eyes at me when I say it again. But I do feel like, there's a lot happening in the world. There's a lot of bad things happening in the world. There's a lot of pressures in the world. There's a lot of change. I do find that we need to balance that sometimes with the positivity of things that happen in our country, the human stories that we can capture, around our whole unique country. I want to see more of those human stories. I want to see more parts of Australia on the ABC. I want to see those human interest stories more and more. We do many great programs that do it, but I think that is something that we can do more of in general our coverage. I think the other thing that we've got to do more, and again, this is something that we've been speaking about, and I guess the departure of Q&A has sort of, risen this as both a challenge and an opportunity, is sometimes I think, obviously the ABC, we're factual accuracy, impartiality, objective perspectives, these are all the important things. But sometimes maybe we need to, we do it well on audio, but maybe we also need to do it on television, provide program formats that enable, different relevant perspectives to meet in a more of a town hall format, a town hall style, rather than our journalists having to present, balance in different relevant perspectives. So I do feel that we need to embrace that town hall notion a bit more and have program formats that enable that. So we are bringing, what are the relevant perspectives to Australians to them in a way that's engaging and impactful. And so those are two areas that I think, yes, we're constantly talking about and working on at the moment.
Thanks very much.
Is the ABC looking to commission any new TV-style town hall-style shows, like anything tomorrow or into the near future?
Yeah, I mean, we have insiders. David Spears in the room. I mean, that's already a great version of that, and David does a fantastic job with, the regular guests from time to time. So that's a great example. We have many forums and town halls and things that exist on our audio services. Radio National did some great ones recently. There was one about energy, there was one in Dubbo. They're actually fantastic when you hear about them, because when people are forced to actually try and come together, they actually try and come together for an outcome. They actually try and come together for an objective. And this is where Australia is a unique kind of country. And I was going to riff off and then into why Big Brother's different in Australia than other markets, but I won't, because it's partly
You're welcome to.
I know. Well, it is interesting. Like in America, in shows like that, people go to conflict. In Australia, in shows like that, people come to common friendship. And I can't describe that in any other way, and that's just the natural way that our nation goes. And I think that's the wonderful thing about Australia. So when you put relevant perspectives in an environment where they're not there to argue against each other, they're there to find solutions and outcomes, you actually find really constructive work. And guess what? Ordinary people are really good at contributing in those moments. So yes, we have great examples. Insiders, again, one of the best and highest rating programs on Sundays. But we need something, one or more things big on television that enables us to do that. We're working on ideas at the moment. They won't be announced tomorrow, but they're coming.
Okay, we wait with great interest. Julie Hare, National Press Club Director.
Thank you so much for your speech. During the speech, you outlined the ABC as a growing, a bold, a trusted, publicly funded organisation. However, if I look at a story in The Australian from 2 weeks ago, The Australian regularly takes a very opposite view of that. The story is titled "ABC Image Takes Hit as Community Loses Faith," and then goes on to report about a survey that's... Can I just read the first paragraph to you so we can get a sense of how different it is to what you said? The Australian public's perception of the ABC has diminished over the past year across a range of key metrics, with fewer people expressing faith in the national broadcaster to deliver news in an accurate and impartial way, and growing concern that the publicly funded media organisation doesn't cover regional issues as well as its competitors. That stands in direct opposition to what you just told us now. How do you reconcile the narratives that are thrown at the ABC by organisations such as The Australian and Sky After Dark?
Well, the lovely thing I think about that is actually they want us to be what we want to be. We want to be trusted. In fact, our trust scores have come up again. We want to be valued. Our valued scores have come up. We want to have impact. We can do more to have real journalistic impact. We're all actually think the ABC stands for the same things. My job, the job of my team, is to make sure we deliver to that. Yes, there'll always be commentary and people will have views, and there'll be endless column inches dedicated to does the ABC do a great job and do its journos make errors, and that's part of the vibrancy of media. Some of it, I think, is, again, as I said, is opportunistic. Some of it's not founded in fact. Some of it maybe is just sport, but we subject ourselves, and we must subject ourselves to scrutiny. And again, the great thing about that comment is everybody seems to understand actually what we're here for, and we've got to deliver to that.
Surely some of that journalism, including articles like this, are not impartial.
Well, that's up to them. I'm not here to comment necessarily on other people's journalism, other than sometimes when I think it is that does need comment, and I won't be doing that all the time because we don't want to have a running discourse about that. What we will do is, when we can see criticism of us that is valid, we must make sure that we respond in the appropriate way. Otherwise, I don't want everybody focused on that all the time. It's the wrong thing. It leads to poor decisions. We must stay focused on the work, and we must be able to excise any noise that's irrelevant from that exercise. And that's just part of our job, and we have to do that every day. Hopefully I'm bringing that to my teams. It's a struggle, right? Because when stuff is written, it hurts. But, you know, again, I will say, hey, are you doing a good job? Was the work great? Yes, yes. Okay, stick to that. That's the knowledge. Stick to those principles. Ignore the noise.
Thank you very much.
Krishani Janchi from SBS. Sorry, what am I saying? From The Guardian. Apologies.
Thanks for your address. I have a question about the ABC's funding. Kim Williams has said the ABC has suffered a funding reduction of about $150 million each year for the last 10 years. Do you expect the Labor government to do more than just reverse the indexation freeze and provide more funding for the ABC?
Yeah, look, I think that's something that the Chair has been in discussions with in government, and I'll leave those discussions to him and government. I think obviously there are areas that we can do more. We can do more children's content. I'd like to do more. We know when we do, it works. It resonates with an audience. It's important to the progression of, you know, children and families and that sense of national identity. So we can certainly do more in children's. I think we can do more documentary. We can do more history, science. You know, these are things that feed the fabric of society. And we can certainly do more in all of those spaces. So always more money, I think, we can do more with. But it's also, I'm also conscious that I need to ensure that I'm constantly looking internally to the organisation to find where there are opportunities to say, you know what, we can deprioritise that exercise and take that spend and put it to a higher purpose. That is an exercise we do constantly. So those two things together, I think, are exercises that we need to do to make sure that we're delivering great content and services to Australia. Because at the end of the day, that's our job, right? And we did find some things when I started, and I'm sure there'll be more as we go forward. And there might be some compromises that we need to make, and we might need to say, you know what, that doesn't warrant that investment. We might need to say to people, we're going to stop that to start that. And that exercise is going on all the time. But yes, children's, documentary, adult drama, comedy, again, really difficult for many other parts of the sector now to cover those sorts of areas. The commercial model has changed, it's become global. We can do it as a local player and it's freely available. So yes, more will deliver more results.
Thank you. Melissa Clark from the ABC.
Thanks very much for your speech. I'm wondering if you could give us a little more information around the arrangements with local news outlets that the ABC will be sharing emergency content with and the broader scope of that. How can the ABC ensure that what it's doing is enabling and supporting local media outlets and wire services that exist and isn't stifling their opportunities at a time when eyeballs might be coming to their websites in times such as emergencies?
Yeah, I think the emergency broadcasting, and again, it's optional for the local players. So the emergency broadcasting is, hey, we have the resources to enable ourselves to do 24-hour coverage when something really critical is happening. So saying to a local player who has a small community, a digital community, whatever it is, that's impacted by whatever that event is, hey, you can access our coverage to service your communities. I think that's just a public service. I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we are reaching as many audiences as possible in many ways. Remember, I'm focused on the work, not the distribution. It's the work that is the most value. Other developments, I think, again, this is something that we've been working on a bunch of pilot programs with Deakin University, and we've been doing things with various local media players around the country, just to understand where would the ABC help in a way that maybe doesn't hurt an organisation like AAP, for example, but can help that mix in just buffeting or buttressing that media operators. You know, many of these people, you know, they're solo operators. They do amazing work for their local communities. If they can just get a bit more support from someone like ourselves, they can just provide a fuller service that will enable them to keep that engagement and keep the important work that they do by supporting that with the work we do. We've got to work out the balance of that and make sure the detail of that, and we're talking to university colleagues and we're talking to those local media players to understand how that all works. But I hope we'll be making more announcements about that soon. Mark Tapley, who's in the room, takes a big responsibility in that area, and it's something we're really keen to do a lot more of, because you know what's happened in regional and rural Australia is, you know, the market has become globalised but certainly nationalised. So, you know, you're competing with the SMH if you're in Wagga or Hobart or any of these markets, or some small like Temora or Kondiala, you know, and it's difficult. the audience goes to, the higher production value source. But they still provide really great local stuff. So, you know, we've got to support that in the right way that enables them to have a real engagement with their audiences that can be fuller, and we can support them to do that. The other thing that I think we need to do as the ABC, which we're also working on, is there's actually a lot of great content that happens. A lot of it's on audio. We have, you know, 59, I think, breakfast programs that go around the country every day in different markets. Like, it's an incredible, incredible endeavour. All of those local radio programs, this is outside the metro markets, right? All of them have local news, and it's audio news. It sort of goes to air and it's lost. We need to find a way where we can provide optionality to viewers or audiences in those local markets where maybe they can get a localised ABC service, where maybe we'll use tools, maybe some AI tools or whatever, to take all that local audio news work that happens and turn it into a digital product that exists throughout the day, that local audiences can have the option to engage with a localised version of ABC News Digital. So there's a lot of work going on in that space, recognising the need for us to really support those rural and regional markets that are losing media services every day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mel.
I'm glad you mentioned AI because it was an issue that I wanted to canvass with you. So Southern Cross Media has announced that they're developing what they're calling a proprietary software platform, effectively with AI capabilities to help their journalists gather and prepare radio news bulletins. So these bulletins would still be, they say, fact-checked, edited and read by journalists, but this would help them effectively increase the number of regional bulletins they're outputting. Like, what are the red lines for the ABC here? Would that be a red line? Like, what are the ways in which the ABC is looking to use AI to sort of complement what we're doing? And is that something we'd ever consider?
Look, I think AI for us is a tool, and I think, you know, it's a tool that enables our humans. I think people should be looking at those tools and understanding how they can help in the work that you do to make that work better, or to achieve more, or to break more stories. I mean, you know, I saw an incredible example recently where someone was able to take a year's worth of council minutes and put it into an AI tool and ask the question, what are the themes that come out over the year? And to get those themes pretty much in, you know, 5 minutes of computer work, which would have taken, you know, 5 young people a year to do the same exercise. Like, it can be incredible, but that should never replace the human endeavour of what story am I telling and why. And that's why I think focus on the storytelling. So we would never have AI-generated news just for the sake of generating content. It must be human originated and it must be human dealt with, but the tools can be a massive asset for the organisation as people. And to a degree, you know, there's this constant debate, you know, will AI cost people's jobs? Well, it won't, but it will change jobs. And it should enable us to do better work. And that's where we need to end up with. So, you know, that's an exercise, and guess what? The journalists are talking, you know, walking with their feet, talking with their hands. They're on it already. The smart ones are in there and really experimenting with every tool that they can. So I'm sure you are, Jane. I'm sure many people in the room are. And it's going to provide a massive assistance to the output that we should be able to generate. I mean, local councils, with the decline of local media, have escaped a lot of scrutiny. They probably don't feel it, but they have. So the ability to use tools like that to turn the focus back on where a lot of important decisions get made, I think, is a great asset.
All right. Our next question. Megan Poore from the Women's Advocate. Sorry.
Megan Poore, the Women's Advocate. Managing Director, the ABC Act requires independence, yet the ABC pays ACON, which assesses editorial content. The BBC withdrew from Stonewall in 2021, yet cultural damage persisted. Critics argue this corrodes accountability to Parliament and public trust. Will the ABC Board commission an independent audit now of how the ACON relationship has shaped editorial culture, including coverage of contested areas such as sex and gender, and table that audit to Parliament, or will you follow the BBC and end the relationship with ACON?
As I understand it, the ACON relationship was driven out of a people and culture relationship. I think we sponsor an event. And obviously, I would say we've gone to ACON people from time to time in some of the editorial coverage that we've done. So look, we are, and I think as a management exercise, always assessing the relationships that we have with different organisations, the people that we go to for commentary and expertise, and making sure that at every given stage we live by our principles of accuracy and impartiality, and that will be a constant exercise that we need to do in all categories, including in this one. It's something that, you know, we've spoken about recently, and again, the organisation may well have changed the way it operates over time. So I don't think it'll be subject to a board review, but it's something that we look at as management constantly.
The questions about governance and accountability, excuse me, on sex and gender, ACON assesses content, and the ABC systematically sources LGBTQ+ advocacy organisations, ACON, Equality Australia, AusPath, yet excludes women's rights organisations. Again, will you commission that audit and table it to Parliament, or will you withdraw from ACON? Given the
ACON relationship is a sponsorship relation for an event, so we will look at that when that comes up for renewal. In terms of the area that you mentioned, yes, I think that is a discussion that myself and the Head of News are having. Is our coverage of the issues in those areas accurate? Have we done enough? Are we light? Have we covered the relevant perspectives? If we feel that we haven't, then that's an examination that we as managers should have all the time, and should be ensuring that we're making the right decisions. So that is a current and constant exercise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final question today is from David Spears from the ABC.
Thanks, Jane, and thank you, Hugh, for the address and the shout out for insiders as well.
Always looking after you, David.
9 a.m. Sundays, ABC 2.
I think you're ratings. You don't have to do that promo in this room, David.
Look, you spoke in the speech about how audience trends have changed over the last 20 or so years, from those big broadcast audiences to now accessing on iView, on YouTube, on TikTok, on all sorts of platforms. I'm just wondering, as a leader, how you think about where it's going. What does the future look like 20 years from now, and how do you allocate the right resources? And for those journalists, particularly those a bit younger than me, working out where to focus their energies, their expertise. I mean, we have some terrific journalists like Claudia Long here who do amazing journalism on social media that, you know, makes people like me scratch my head and think, how can you do that? But what should journos be thinking about? What are you thinking about where audiences are going and how to direct resources in the right way?
Yeah, well, the lovely thing about that question is, you know, back in the dreaming, storytelling was important. Like, community was forged on stories. 50,000 years from today, stories will still be critical. So people that have the capacity to tell stories, great. People that have the capacity to break stories, if you're news and current affairs, great. What are the stories that you want to tell? And are those stories of relevancy to the Australian population? It's a real skill. It's a skill that I would encourage any young person coming into to focus on first, like the identification of story. Because if you don't do that, you know, TikTok is a different beast to YouTube, is a different beast to Instagram. Like, they all have different story formats, but at the end of the day, it's still story that drives audience engagement. So storytelling, number one. Number two, the methodology of the creation of content is changing. If I look at young people coming through, they not only do the storytelling, they do the graphics, they do the audio design, they do the shooting. You know, they become these predator models that do it all. And yeah, you know, like Jane's like, oh my God, yeah. Like, those are interesting skills. When you're looking at these new platforms, you think, oh my God, we were funded to do television and radio. Now we do television, radio and digital. Now we do television, radio, digital and podcasts. Then we do television, radio, digital, podcast and social. Then we have to do YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Reddit, like the proliferation of platforms, our need to fill all that environment. Like, we're going to need people that have different capabilities in the way they produce content to be able to do that. So storytelling, production creation, these are two skills, and the young people and the young journalists that we have, and the announcement we'll make tomorrow will talk to that theme of, wow, these are people that can tell and present stories in a different way. Leah Walsh, who does Instagram, our TikTok, I mean, her understanding of how to tell a story in a format that suits TikTok is incredible. Claudia's ability to do that, incredible. Like, so there's a storytelling skill, then there's a platform skill, and there's a production skill. These three things come together, and the young people are there. But I do hope and I do expect that we don't want to lose what is the core skill, which is what is the story and how am I going to tell it.
Thanks.
And on that note, Hugh Marks, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, Jane.
Please accept our membership, our gift of membership to the NPC, and please join me in thanking Hugh Marks. Thanks.
Saturday.
Who was in the theatre?
Just the band. Guest starring Tim Rogers and Justine Clark.
No one saw anyone come in.